10 years ago, after hearing her baby had fetal anomaly, Kate Carson had to have an abortion being already 35 weeks pregnant. Since she had to face so many problems, like traveling 2,000 miles to get her medical needed abortion, Kate has been fighting for access to abortion more broadly as an activist. She's now a semantic coach who supports women who undergo reproductive health problems. Kate lives in the United States with her husband and her 2 children. Hi everyone, today I would like to welcome Kate Carson. We are going to have a very difficult but much needed conversation about abortion, the consequences for women having an abortion and the consequences for women not having an abortion. And of course, we will also talk about the abortion ban in the US at the moment, the overturn of Roe V. Wade. Kate, thank you so much for being here with me today, for your courage to speak up. I think it's incredibly brave of you. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It is a topic very dear to my heart, and I'm happy to come on and talk to you about it.
Before we start, I would like to ask you to give a short introduction of yourself. And I would also like to ask you why it is so important to you to participate in this episode.
My name is Kate Carson. I live and work in the United States. And 10 years ago, I had to have an abortion of my own. It was a wanted pregnancy. My baby was diagnosed with fetal anomalies when I was 35 weeks pregnant. Her brain had not developed properly and her prognosis was extremely poor. My husband and I chose to have an abortion rather than bring her into the world to suffer in the way that she would have. Even 10 years ago in the United States, when abortion was legally protected, I had to travel 2,000 miles to get my abortion in another state because of the later dates of my need. Having to get kicked out of healthcare like that, it was horrible, and it really changed the way I relate to the world. Since then, I have been holding space for women who have to end a pregnancy like this for 10 years at a group called Ending a Wanted Pregnancy, and I've been fighting for abortion access more broadly as an activist. In the last couple of years, I've even changed professionally. I used to be a scientist and a teacher, and I have changed my profession to continue supporting women who are undergoing reproductive health problems as a somatic coach. So both in my volunteer hours at the support group and in the activist world, and also in my professional life as a coach, I hold women who have had abortions all day, every day. And it matters to me a great deal.
Thank you. And why is it so important to you to participate in this episode?
Well, I know that your audience is mostly not American. You know, I'm married to a man from New Zealand. Often I know that outsiders can look at America and just be like, well, they're America. They're crazy. Like they do crazy things. And yes, I agree. We are, and we do. But it's so easy to feel separate from that. You know, I live in a state called Massachusetts where everyone feels safe because it is a more progressive state. And yet I had to travel anyway. You don't know until you know how many of your rights that you've lost. You don't know until you know how vulnerable they've been for decades. It's important to me to speak to the international community about this issue because it is really easy to get complacent when you just look at America and say, well, they're crazy. And unfortunately, the same factors that led to us losing our abortion rights in many, many places across the country are present in all cultures, right? Like there are power-hungry politicians in all cultures, and there is shaming around sex in all cultures, right? So I want everyone to understand that when you pay attention at home, you can avoid the kind of catastrophes we're facing here.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to explain myself why I wanted to have an episode on this topic. First of all, the main reason for me is out of solidarity with the women in the US. That is the most important reason for me. And I strongly believe that women should always support one another, even if you feel that a specific topic does not affect you. Because I'm 54, I'm already in menopause, so abortion doesn't really affect me. I still feel I should express my support to women who do need an abortion, whether it's in the US or someplace else in the world. Second is that we, women in Europe, we should not kid ourselves and think that this will not happen to us, because you mentioned just now like those crazy Americans, and I talked to a few Dutch women And they were like, oh, well, those crazy Americans, this will not happen to us. And I'm like, well, before America was known as the land of the free, the American dream, the land with endless possibilities. So, yes, if this can happen in America, I think it can happen anywhere. As far as Europe is concerned, I live in the Netherlands. There's an abortion ban in Malta. There's an abortion ban in Poland. And Poland is just 2 borders away from the Netherlands. So I think that the abortion discussion is about all women all around the world.
Yes.
Because if we women do not get a say in what happens to our own bodies, so help us God, we are doomed. And yes, I know this sounds very dramatic, but I really believe it is. We are going to talk about abortion, the abortion ban. I would also like to mention a book I read, The Turnaway Study, The Cost of Denying Women Access to Abortion by Diana Green Forster. And the main questions in this study are, does abortion hurt women? And what are the harms from being able to access a wanted abortion? Kate, I believe you mentioned before that you are familiar with the Turnaway Study. Is that right? Am I
Yes,
correct?
that's true. I have read the Turnaway Study in its academic paper form, the shorter
Mm-hmm.
one, not the full book. I've certainly read the abstracts and I'm familiar with it. We talk about it a lot in the abortion world because the main takeaway for me is that when women need an abortion and they say, this is why I need an abortion, they're right. So if
Yeah.
it's like, I need an abortion to avoid bankrupting my family, and then they get turned away and they don't get the abortion, their family goes bankrupt. I need an abortion in order to give me the freedom to extricate myself from an abusive relationship, and then they don't get the abortion and they're stuck in the abusive relationship. This is what we see as compared to the women who get the abortion and then get out of the abusive relationship, who get the abortion and then are able to keep their family solvent financially. The takeaway for me is women know their situations. They
Exactly.
know them better than anyone else can.
Yeah, that's true. For our listeners who have not heard of the study, the research team interviewed about 1,000 women for 5 years, twice a year. They found those who'd been denied abortion experienced worse economic and mental health outcomes than the cohort that received care. So it just confirms what
Yes.
you just said. And 95% of study participants who received an abortion said they made the right decision.
Yes.
Yes.
It's so important. There's this story on the anti abortion side that paints abortion as something that ruins lives. And it's so important to understand that when you're pregnant, you can either have the abortion or you can have the baby. And both of those can affect you.
Mhm.
And if you know which one you want, that is the path to the greatest mental health, emotional health, and to the greatest just being happy with your life, right? Like there's such a story around women who get abortions just feeling horrible grief and regret. That may be true for many. I have certainly experienced feelings of grief and the weight of my responsibility, which is how I describe the feeling of regret, different than regretting my choice. But I don't regret my choice. I'm in that majority. I really would do it again. And also, I know my mental health would be a wreck if I hadn't had mine. So
Yeah,
it makes so much sense.
yeah. Because now there's an abortion ban in the US. Women who have an abortion can be prosecuted, even the doctors. Do you think that because of this ban that women will have fewer abortions, that there will be less abortions?
So I want to give a little more nuance to the situation in America. What happened is our protection of abortion as a right was
Mm-hmm.
taken away. So it
Mm-hmm.
used to be that abortion up to a certain, unfortunately, they were measuring it in weeks. They were measuring viability in weeks. So abortion up to like 25 weeks, say, was protected federally. And now it's not anymore. And because of that, the next layer in America, the law is layered. So the United States law is supreme. And then
Yeah.
below that are state laws. So each state now makes its own laws on abortion. And in many of the conservative states, almost all of them, they banned abortion or banned it like after 5 weeks, which is you're barely
Yeah.
even pregnant. Most women don't even know they're pregnant then. Or after a heartbeat, but the heart is one of the earliest organs to develop in the fetal pool. It's just very early. It's very restrictive. What we see is a lot of spotty access across America. There are still states, like my state will still provide abortion up to X number of weeks. And it's a pretty generous number, like 26, 25.
Okay.
However, many other states do not. And so what we're seeing is women scrambling for care.
Yeah.
And there will be some women who do not get their abortion, and they're going to turn away into the cautionary tale of the turnaway study. Unfortunately, like there's no reason to believe they would be different than the generation before them. And then there are going to be many, many women who get their care one way or another. And in a state like Texas, where there's not only a ban, but there's incentivization to sue anyone who aids in the access of care. So in Texas, partners like men can be sued if they drive their partner across state lines. Doctors can be sued for giving referrals to out-of-state care. What we're seeing a lot in Texas is women self-organizing to get their own medicated abortion in the mail and to have abortions at home. Now, medicated abortion is very safe. In the grand scheme of things, it's very safe and it works most of the time. But the way this becomes dangerous is that when there are complications or when there are concerns, this woman now has to go into her local emergency room and like weigh her safety legally with her safety physically. Now, there's no physical difference between having a medicated abortion and having a miscarriage. She should just go in and say she had a miscarriage. There's a lot of emotional pressure, and women are being pressured to out themselves, and it's just scary. And so women will avoid getting the medical care that they need when they need it. So what I'm seeing is a lot of do-it-yourself. Fortunately, do-it-yourself with medicated abortion is a lot safer than do-it-yourself used to be with trying to use, oh God, a coat hanger, which is horrifying. However, there's still going to be more injury and there's still going to be more harm if women don't feel that they can go to their doctors with things that are going wrong in their body. My fear is that similar numbers will get abortions to before, but that it just will be less safe and that women will, and their families and the people who help them will be more punished. It's horrible. It's just a horrifying reality.
Yeah. So do you think the mortal rate among women who are having an abortion, do you think that will increase?
I think the morbidity rate is already increasing. Personally, there's the medicated abortion side, but there's also the go in and get an abortion in a clinic side. And when you are having your uterus scooped out, you need doctors. And there's like a certain number of appointments in a day to do that procedure, the D&C, the D&E, whatever you're getting done. Clinics are being inundated. So they're cramming in way more people than they had to before. People are having to wait many more weeks to get their wait list. So I had to get an abortion later in dates because I got new information later in my pregnancy. But now some women get their information plenty on time, but they can't get an appointment for 4 weeks, for 6 weeks. The longer you wait in a pregnancy to end it, the more complications arise. So morbidity is when there's injury or harm or complication. That, I believe, must already be going up because when they're happening later, it goes up. When the doctors are stressed out and there's not enough doctors to do this, how could mistakes not become more frequent?
Yeah.
So I suspect that's what's already happening. Mortality, I hate to think about mortality. It is something I expect to see. Now, abortion is much safer for morbidity and mortality than live birth is. But when it's legal, it can stay that way. When it's illegal, it puts pressures on the system that makes it get more dangerous. And my worst fear is that things will not get better in the United States until women start dying and people realize what they've done. And I hate that. But it's how it had to turn around in Ireland. I don't see why it would be different here.
Yeah. Okay, back to the turnaway study.
Yes.
I mentioned before the two main questions in this study. Does abortion hurt women? And what are the harms from being able to access a wanted abortion? Let me start with the first question. Does abortion hurt women? And these are quotes from the turnaway study, just for our listeners. The turnaway study does not find any evidence that abortion hurts women. On the contrary, actually, this confirmed what you mentioned earlier. Women who received an abortion were either the same or more frequently better off than women who were denied an abortion. Their physical health was better, their employment and financial situations were better, their mental health was better, and eventually the same. They had more aspirational plans for the future. They had a greater chance of having a wanted pregnancy later in time and being in a good romantic relationship years down the road. The children they already had were better off too. So these are the women who received an abortion. So let's have a look at the women who were denied an abortion according to the Turnaway study. The Turnaway study did find evidence that women were hurt by carrying an unwanted pregnancy to term. Continued pregnancy and childbirth is associated with large physical health risk, so great that actually 2 women in the study died from childbirth
Mm,
related causes.
mm,
Many others experienced complications from delivery, and extending over the next 5 years increased chronic head and joint pain, hypertension, poorer self rated overall health. In the short run, women experience increased anxiety, loss of life satisfaction after being denied an abortion, and, also mentioned by you, those with violent partners found it difficult to extricate themselves after the birth. Over the next several years, women who were denied abortion experienced economic hardships not experienced by women who received their wanted abortions. So, how is it then possible that there are claims that abortions have such issues on women's mental health?
I think it's politically motivated and it's propaganda and it's a self fulfilling prophecy. Because if, say, you grow up in a community where abortion is looked down on, maybe it's your church community, maybe it's your local community. If you grow up in a community where you're told your whole life that abortion is murder and you'll be a murderer and you'll regret it your whole life and you will just like never be able to look yourself in the mirror again, you're primed for that, right? You've been basically brainwashed into that's your reality around abortion. Women who are religious get abortions at the same rate as women who are not religious
Yeah,
because we experience sometimes even higher. Like I know the Catholic community has slightly higher abortions than other religious sects in America, partly because of the opinion on contraception. Like if it also doesn't like contraception, then there are going to be more unintended pregnancies. What we see then is that women in these communities will still recognize if their pregnancy is untenable, if their situation is untenable, will still pursue an abortion when it is their survival at stake, and will then not feel safe to talk to anyone about it. Understandably so, because they could be
yeah,
excommunicated from their church, they could be mistreated by their family. Some young girls in particular can find themselves homeless if their family really doesn't agree. It's a real risk. There's the social risk and the actual survival risk. And if that's your situation, then you just keep it inside and you think, I'm supposed to feel terrible.
yeah,
This is murder. Of course, you're going to feel worse when you're in that situation. When women do feel that way, when women really do have mental health struggles after an abortion, it is
yeah,
usually because they were primed for it. And the same people who are saying, this is going to happen to you, are making it happen because they will not treat that woman with love and understanding if she wants to talk about her abortion. They also would not treat her with financial support if she had a baby. She's alone. Being alone with no connection under the weight of a taboo, that itself is actually quite bad for mental health. And so I think that where does it come from? I think it was invented.
okay,
But because it was invented, it shows up. Because there is so much anti abortion sentiment, it's a self fulfilling prophecy for some women in some situations. Other women, like me in my situation, I did talk about my abortion. My family rallied around me to support me. They helped me financially. My friends all came to be at my side. That is a very different emotional experience. And when I have that, even though, the situation I was in was extreme and I grieved very deeply, people may look at my grief and say that's depression. It's not depression, it's grief. It's
yeah,
healthy. It's normal. I would have grieved this baby if she had lived too. This is a baby that was going to be grieved either way. Grief is something I'm capable of feeling in a healthy way. I feel very well in my life and in my mind. And in part, it's because my community was around me to help me process that.
yeah,
No one shows up, it's harder to process. It gets more painful. And they say, look how painful it is. It's
yeah.
just not fair.
No, no, it's not. Back to the Turnaway study. Why do women want to have abortions? When asked why they want to end a pregnancy, women give specific and personal reasons. And their fears are borne out in the experiences of women who carry unwanted pregnancies to term. Women seeking abortion worry that they cannot afford to raise a baby, and women denied abortions are more likely to live in poverty. It's the self fulfilling prophecy.
Yes.
Women worry that their relationship is not strong enough to support a child. The study finds that relationships with the men involved dissolves, regardless of whether they carry the pregnancy to term or have an abortion. They worry about not being able to take care of their existing children, and the study finds evidence that women's children do worse on several measures of health and development when women carry an unwanted pregnancy to term than when they receive an abortion. So, the Turnaway study brings powerful evidence about the ability of women to foresee consequences and make decisions that are best for their lives and families.
Imagine that.
How crazy! This is really crazy. So, if women can foresee the consequences
Yes.
of the pregnancy, and apparently their fears might come true or will come true, then why is it that women are not trusted to make those decisions on their own?
Yeah. This is patriarchy. this is
Yeah.
this is the water we swim in, that women are considered untrustworthy. When I say patriarchy, I don't mean men. I mean the
Hmm.
system we're in, the culture we have. The culture I live in says the best thing a woman can be is a mother, and how you measure motherhood is with selflessness. And if you just extrapolate to the conclusion of that, the most motherly best thing a woman can do is die for her baby. And that's such bullshit. It's such bullshit
Yeah,
because a dead mother
I
is not
agree.
good for anything.
No.
We're not nothing to, it's horrible. It's horrible. It's a huge sacrifice. And I don't want to see one more woman sacrificed on the altar of selflessness. Like, I don't. When we trust ourselves and let ourselves be worthy enough, and when we let ourselves be the expert on our situation, we
Yeah,
know, we know what
yeah.
to do.
Why do you think that women are being accused of thinking so lightly about abortion? Like, oh, well, I read those horrible remarks on the internet, like,
Yeah.
she should have used birth control. Abortion is not birth control. And I'm like, oh, I just had sex. Now I'm pregnant. Oh, you know what? What am I going to do? I forgot the pill. You know what? Let me have an abortion.
Yeah. I really think we women hold the power of life in our womb.
Hmm.
Men can't make life. They like to really focus in on that moment of conception because it's the only role they play.
Absolutely.
Then
Yeah.
there are 9 months of gestating and giving of yourself and your tissues and then opening your body, and the scars are left on the body. We can create life, and it is a massive power, and it is very heavy. It's a huge responsibility. The other side of that coin is that we can choose not to make life, and
Yeah.
people get very uncomfortable with that. You can't
Mm.
just have the life-giving power without the death-giving or the refusing to make life-giving power too. If
Mhm.
you only have one side of that, that's perverse. And so in order to have this power, which is enormous and sort of magical and mystical, you have to really step into, and I can decide when not to create life. And that, I think, is where people get really uncomfortable. Really, really uncomfortable. Because if they can trap us in our life-giving power, then they still control us. That's the
Uh-huh.
way I feel about politics and abortion. They're
Yeah.
just trapping me in my fertility. Why didn't she use birth control? Oh my gosh. She probably did. Or maybe she had put her partner in charge of it and he didn't.
Yeah.
Or perhaps she did not use birth control because she did not know about it, or because fertile humans have a sex drive, particularly around ovulation. And she's a fertile human. We
Mhm.
get to make mistakes. So whether or not there was contraception involved, if she's pregnant and does not want to be pregnant, that's all she needs to know.
Yeah. I understand that there's a discussion about the no exception rule, the right to make a choice, no exceptions to the rule, sexual abuse, rape, medical issues, etc. If a woman, for any reason, does not want to have a child, I believe she should have access to abortion.
Yep, I'm with you. So this is so interesting. In America, there are a lot of states that say no abortion except for rape and incest, or
Mm-hmm.
except for, they'll say, a fatal anomaly, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And people who make these laws think that it makes sense and think that these exceptions will be applied. They're not. No one's getting that exception. My baby was not supposed to walk, talk, hold up the weight of her head, or swallow. She might not have been able to coordinate breathing. She was definitely going to die 97% within the first year, more than 99% within the first 3 years. They told me this was not a fatal anomaly. They said, that's not fatal.
Excuse me?
Because of the 3% that survive past a year, because of the less than 1% that if anyone ever survives, it's not fatal. No one's getting these exception abortions. No one. So first of all, I just need people to know that when you make a law that sounds logical, it does not mean it's going to be enforced the way you intend. But second of all, I'm with you. If a woman is pregnant and her pregnancy is untenable for any reason, and I believe at any date, having received my own news so late in pregnancy, it is cruelty to force her to continue that pregnancy and continue to create life with her body. It is simple cruelty. When people think about abortion, they're always comparing it to not getting pregnant in the first place, but that is just not a comparison we can make. Mm-hmm. When we are considering abortion, there is a pregnancy, and there are two paths forward. You can end the pregnancy or you can continue the pregnancy. And continuing takes so much of her energy, her resources, her health, and her safety. It is insane to deny her the ability to say no to that.
But don't you think because you had an urgent medical reason, right?
Yeah, I did.
So do you think your reason for having an abortion, your medical reason, is more valid than another woman who just doesn't want to become a mother?
I don't think my reason's better. I think that we all get abortions for the same reason. Mm-hmm. And that reason is that something about the pregnancy is untenable. It is unworkable. It is scary and impossible. And for me, what was scary and impossible was my daughter's condition. And for another woman who does not want to have a child, what's scary and impossible are all the realities of how her life has to change to have this child, or perhaps the realities that her child will be born into in her situation. She might want more for her child than what she's got, or she might just not want to be a mom. Both of those situations, it's untenable. And I will tell you, the main thing I felt when I was told I couldn't get an abortion and had to go running across the country, I felt desperation. I was desperate not to be pregnant anymore. And because I was desperate, I was making all these backup plans, and some of them were very unsafe. One of my backup plans was to go off the grid and have this baby, and she couldn't eat. She would die. She wouldn't live very long, right? She would die. But it was a high-risk birth because of her condition. It was a risky birth. I could have died. I was willing to consider things that would kill me.
Yeah.
When I look at other women who are in their own situations and who are desperate not to be pregnant for their own reasons, I know the desperation, and I know it could kill them too. All I want to do is open the door to their thriving. It's okay. It's okay. You get to make this choice. This is your body. You were entrusted with this life and death power for a reason. We don't have to know what it is. Just trust yourself. And I just want her to find her way home.
Yeah. Wow. In Ohio, last year, there was this 10-year-old little girl who got raped, got pregnant, had to travel out of state because she was denied an abortion. She traveled to Indiana to get an abortion. I understand that the doctor who performed the abortion, Dr. Caitlin Bernard, was being investigated by the Attorney General because he or she wanted to start a lawsuit against her. And then she started her own lawsuit against the Attorney General. I was like, what kind of circus is this? And then I believe all charges were dropped. But in the meanwhile, doctors can be sued now, and they might even go to jail.
Yes.
What do you think of this?
It's having a massive chilling effect on the practice of abortion all over the country. So in Boston, it's a city that's well known for its medical care. Harvard University is here. We've got many med schools. We've got many hospitals. They're world class. Some of the big names turn women away for abortions that are actually legal here because of this chilling effect. We could go to jail if we mess up at all. And it's just many, many, many physicians who should be providing care are not. And so it actually puts a chokehold on the situation even more. That poor girl from Ohio. And I feel I always need to point out that this is not about who cares about children, because she's a child.
Yeah.
And if you care about her, you care about her.
Yeah.
She needed not to have that baby.
No.
And she deserved to be able to stay home in home care and not have to travel. She deserved
Yeah.
to be able to find the care she needed at home. And it's cruel. It's straight cruelty. For the doctors, it does have a chilling effect. And I know sometimes, like when women get diagnosed with problems with their pregnancy in Texas, their doctors now don't offer them options. And sometimes I have to counsel women, should I ask for options or not? And I usually counsel, no, don't ask your doctor for options. Think about that chilling effect.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a physician listening to this, think about your patients withholding something so big and important from you because they're afraid of you. And many, many doctors who want to do the right thing are afraid to do the right thing. So they don't. So it contributes to the chilling effect.
Yeah. This is, of course, not something that only happens in the US. I also read a story about Teodora del Carmen Vasquez in El Salvador in 2007. She was 39 weeks pregnant when she delivered a stillborn baby girl in the ladies' room in a shopping mall. She was being charged for murdering her baby and sentenced to 30 years in prison. She served 10 years because there is a feminist organization in El Salvador with a very difficult Spanish name. So, so please forgive me. They pleaded for her to free her, and in 2018, she was finally released from jail. She's now an activist herself for the same organization that was responsible for her release. Did you know about this story?
I did. I do pay attention to these things. I know too about a similar story that happened in America, and her name is escaping me. It is an Indian name, and I can't remember what it is. But she had a stillborn baby, and she panicked, and she didn't know what to do with the body, and she put it in a dumpster. But the baby was stillborn, and she was accused of murdering that baby. And she stayed in prison for several years until she could be argued out of prison. Yes, when people target women who are having abortions, there are casualties among women who are having miscarriages and women who are having stillbirths. Because if the thing is, you'd rather punish a woman who had an abortion than anything else, you're going to catch other women in that net as well. Now, I don't think we should be punishing anyone.
No.
Yes, it's horrifying.
But we're talking about punishing women for having an abortion, punishing people who help them, maybe a friend who's driving them. Doctors can go to jail. What about a man who knocked them up?
I know. Texas has that law where you can come after someone to sue them for $10,000, which is a good chunk of money, who aids a woman in getting abortion. And that is putting some partners at risk because they are showing up for their partners. They're showing up for their girlfriends, their wives. So it does put some men at risk a little bit. However, what if he doesn't show up? It only puts the ones who show up at risk. What if he just leaves? Nothing, no harm. These laws are so patriarchal. They are really, really badly sexist because there is no way they could ever punish men, and men would never tolerate it. So of course they're like this. Most of the people in power in America are men. They might care. They might care if they could get punished.
Yeah, I think it's bizarre.
Abortion is way safer than having a baby. That is something I didn't know before I had my abortion. And they gave me all this information and it had stats. And I remember looking at my stat. And of course, I was very advanced in my dates, right? So I had the more dangerous end of the spectrum, more complications when you're 8 months pregnant than when you're 1 or 2 months pregnant. And even my abortion, I remember the rate of morbidity and mortality for a live birth was 9 times higher than for where I was. So 9 times more injuries, 9 times more deaths of women who have full-term babies than even of mine, the latest abortion you can basically have. Now, if you're having an abortion in the first trimester, it is thousands of times safer to have an abortion in the first trimester, maybe even 10,000 times safer. It's quite a bit safer than to carry that pregnancy all the way to term.
Yeah.
However, when it's illegal, weird things happen.
Is the abortion ban a result of religion to protect the unborn child? Because I read several articles about it. There's also this website, I believe, www.prolife.com, and it says every life is precious. So you mentioned earlier the patriarchy. Is it a result of patriarchy? Is it misogyny? Is it men hating women for being able to give life? What is it with those religious protesters outside the clinics? What is it with these people?
This is so, it's all of the above, isn't it? It's all of the above. And some is more in awareness than others. After my abortion, I went pretty deep into studying
Mhm.
spiritual beliefs on this. And one of the things that I read was the Bible.
Okay.
I'm not Christian. I had to make sense of it. And I was reading the Bible. And what I learned from actually reading the Bible myself is that according to the Bible, so Judeo-Christian traditions, Old Testament and New Testament, God breathes life into living creatures. So if there's
Mhm.
no breath, there's no life, according to the Bible.
Okay.
And there's even a part of the Bible that says if you get pregnant under XYZ circumstances, particularly if you get pregnant by a man who's not your husband brings you to the priest who gives you the abortion pills, right?
Oh,
So, yes, people think that they are fighting abortion on behalf of religion. But that is actually really recent. I don't remember the name of this book, but I'm going to send it to you.
yes,
There's a book
please.
that documents the history of abortion in the United States, and it was in, I believe, the 1980s when
Mhm.
the conservative right was trying to gain more power in America. Now, in America, the right has traditionally been associated with small government,
Mhm.
more freedom, which is the opposite of what this is. But small government, more freedom. So therefore, conservative judges would tend to support abortion because, like, more personal freedom, more choice over your body. However, they wanted to really lock it down on the conservative side, and they needed Christian participation. They needed like quite religious participation in order to get the votes out to do that. And they kept trying to find issues that the churches would care enough about to turn out to vote. And the one that landed was this one. Religious institutions, Baptists in particular, evangelical institutions, did not used to be opposed to abortion until the 80s or later. So
Okay.
until within my lifetime. Now, the reason that that's the issue is that people who wanted to be in political power made it the issue so that they could get blocks of voters out
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
mass. And it has worked. It really has
Yeah.
worked. And they've used all that power to lock down the power even more.
Yeah.
And because it worked so well, this is something I want people in other countries to understand. Because it was so effective at turning America conservative, conservative groups and religious bodies in other countries see that and want to repeat it. So this is why in the Netherlands, I know you were telling me there's a
Yeah.
group, a religious group who's really trying to make abortion illegal. This is why they want to converge with conservative political leaders to consolidate power. And they know what does that for you? Convincing people that there are babies being killed because people are generally good and we want to protect innocent life and we all love babies. I love babies. I had an
Yeah.
abortion. I love babies. You love
Yeah.
babies. Like, right, we
Absolutely.
all love babies. You convince people that your opponents are killing babies and they'll do whatever you say. That
Yeah.
can happen anywhere.
Yeah. It's horrible. What I also find very interesting about those protesters outside the clinics is that they say that they want to protect the unborn child.
Mm.
But okay, so maybe you're pregnant, you go to the clinic and you decide not to have an abortion. So they save the innocent life. But then their job is done because then they don't
So
care.
easy.
They don't care about
They don't care. They don't care.
when the baby's born, they're nowhere to be found.
No. I have supported some women who had abortions not for medical reasons, who had abortions for place and life reasons.
Yeah.
And some of these women had actually had babies before. They had been talked into having babies by these religious people. And the religious people say, we'll help you take care of them. We'll
Yeah.
help you with money. We'll help you with formula. What happens? They get a couple of diapers, a couple of
Yeah.
outfits, and that's it. Peace out. And when she said, when she went to these people again to say, you said you would help, they'd say, that's not really our role. Yeah.
Okay.
They're manipulative. That's what they are. They're saying promises of helping you with your baby. Sometimes outside the clinics, they'll promise that they'll help you with your baby. They're not going to. They
Yeah.
don't because they don't care. They just want the Jesus points. They feel that they will get heaven points.
Because
Like,
they
look
say
how
that.
many babies I
Yeah.
saved.
Yeah.
It's an ego trip for them. One of the other things I did when I was processing my own loss was I went and I looked into who was available for adoption in my state. And I was reading all these profiles, and so many of those children are medically complex children like my child. So
Yeah.
many of them
Yeah.
are severely disabled children, many more than like a normal population of people, because women don't always get the news that I got in time, right? And then if
Yeah.
they can't support their baby, what can they do?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I always want to turn to those protesters and I want to say, like, here's
Yeah.
a child you could adopt today
Yeah.
who needs you, who will never be adopted because of these medical problems.
Yeah.
And you know what? You could change their whole life. Their mother did what you wanted me to do. And can you show up for this child? And they would, of course, say no. And I would say, then you're choosing not to have a disabled child too.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Because I read this post on social media about this little girl, this 10-year-old we talked about before. It was a conversation, and this woman talked to this very religious person, and she was like, okay, so when a 10-year-old girl, a little girl, goes to an adoption agency and says, oh, I like to have a baby, because I think it's fun playing with a baby doll or baby girl, what are you going to do, working at the agency? No, a little 10-year-old girl cannot have a baby.
Yeah.
She cannot take care of a baby. She's a child herself. And she was like, okay, exactly. That's my point. So why can a 10-year-old rape victim,
Yes.
why is it that she can be forced to have a baby, being denied an abortion, and she cannot adopt a baby?
No. It's absolute cruelty beyond cruelty. And it's cruelty to the child tose
Yeah.
I'm really glad my mother wasn't 10.
Yeah.
I'm really glad my mother wasn't 10 years old. It's cruel on so many levels. And I wish that people let themselves care in a nuanced and deep way about these issues. Because I really can tell how much the pro-life people in my life care about children. I can. There's this discomfort with actually getting close to the nuance of it. And it's doing a lot of harm.
Yeah.
Inability to get close to the discomfort of these situations does a lot of harm.
Okay, so something else. Do you believe that denying women abortion is also a race, social status issue? Like, because I heard that black women, actually poor women, which unfortunately is something black women, they are suffering from poverty, are most likely to have an abortion.
Yeah. They're also most likely to not get the abortion they need. And they are also most likely to get injured or even die in childbirth when they have a baby. There are many compounding things at play right now. And certainly how much money you have is a huge one. Because if you have enough money, it's easier to get the abortion. It's also easier to have the baby. Everything is more accessible and safer and easier. You don't have to worry about losing your job. I know women who have a baby because they could not take the time off of their work to go get the abortion. And now, like, what do you do with that, right? They couldn't afford to take a few days off. And so they all obviously can't afford a baby, right? So economic considerations are huge. And many of the women in the turnaway study, the women who get turned away are often the poorest women. Now, race also plays a part. Historically, white women like me have had to fight for our right for an abortion, and we still do. And we still do. I do every day fight for this right. But historically, Black women have had to fight for their right to have an abortion and also fight for their right to have a child. Because in our very racist country's history, there were times when Black women have been sterilized against their will, you know? So that's horrifying. When you start to look at intersectionality, the way race plays into this, you know, I mentioned that the woman who went to prison for having a stillbirth in America had an Indian name. She's a South Asian woman. She's an immigrant. The intersectionality matters. It's a little harder for her to express herself than it is for me to express myself. I can tell you how it felt to hold a dead baby and to like realize my baby's not here. She's not in this body. And I can move you with these words. And you might understand why, if this happened to you all of a sudden out of the blue, between the sheer panic and that recognition that there's no life in this body, why someone in that moment might throw a baby's body away. You might understand it. If you're not like college educated writer, right, who can speak to the doctors in a way that they can hear, or the lawyers or whoever, there's a lot more harm that comes from that.
Yeah.
And it's really tough. So is it a racial issue? Everything is a racial issue in America.
Yeah.
Yes. And so is having babies. So abortion and also maternal care are both racial issues in America. Is it an issue of economics? Absolutely. Your turnaways are always going to be the ones that are most vulnerable to economic hardship.
Yeah. Because I think that the rich women, they have enough money to go out of state or perhaps even go out of the country to have an abortion.
Indeed. Yep. My abortion cost $25,000.
Oh my.
And the travel cost another $5,000. So it was a $30,000 expense.
Yeah.
I did not just have that. I may be privileged, but I was not that privileged at that age of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents have a retirement account, and they withdrew money from their retirement account early, which you can do for a medical emergency. Unfortunately, in America, a lot of people don't have retirement accounts. That is the mark of having a retirement is like a massive privilege, right? So I was lucky I had family resources. Not everyone does. Or even with a family, but they just don't have the money. Whoever you are, if you have family and you're lucky enough that your family supports you, which is not a given when you need an abortion at 8 months, what are you to do? It costs money. There are abortion funds, but they're getting drained so fast right now because everyone has to travel. So add the travel money onto everyone's abortion. It's more expensive the more weeks you are. So if you have to wait 4 weeks, that's a different price point. If you have to wait 6 weeks, that's a different price point.
Yeah. I also heard something that if you go to a clinic to have an abortion, that there is a mandatory time to think.
It's horrible.
Do you really want to have an abortion?
It's so patriarchal. Yes.
And that sometimes women, because of this mandatory time, 2, 3, 4 days, they had to think about it, that they were not able to have an abortion anymore because of the time limit.
Yes, because there's a deadline. And if you for some of them too, some of them you can do that consult over the phone or over Zoom, but some of them you have to go to the clinic, and the clinic might be hours from your home. And so you go to the clinic, you take the day off work, you go to the clinic, you have this appointment, and then what if it's a Friday? You have to wait till Monday, right? Like there's no, and so the days add up to like book this appointment, go to the appointment, have the appointment, and then the waiting period of could be 24 hours, could be 3 days, right?
Yeah.
Plus whatever weekends or holidays are inserted in there, plus like the schedules are all booked, it's all full. That can add up to enough time that she can't go anymore. She has to find a different state with different laws now. And that just bumps the price up even more.
Yeah. In the Netherlands, there was a 5-day waiting period.
That's long.
Mandatory. Yeah. And that's been
overturned.
Overturned. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Finally. Yes. But in the Netherlands, abortion is still a criminal act.
Wow.
Women are not sued, but there are few women who know this. But abortion is still a criminal act in the Netherlands.
It was only in the last year or two, very recently, that in New Zealand, they took abortion out of the criminal code. And women had been able to obtain the abortions they needed in New Zealand, but every single one who did, the doctors had to deem her physically or mentally unfit to have the child. And that may not seem like such a big deal to people because they're like, oh, well, it's just like you can still get your abortion. The doctor just says like it'll affect your mental health. But when you have a system that officially labels every woman who has abortion as crazy and mentally unwell to have a child, that's a problem. That could be used against us so easily. And call me American for caring about this, but like they use every loophole they can get to get you here, So I don't trust in the goodness of people to just like not use bad law. I want to get rid of bad laws.
Yeah, I agree. Oh my. What about the women who you just mentioned it earlier as well? Women are afraid to tell other people that they have had an abortion, afraid for the stigma. They feel ashamed because you work with women, right? Ending a wanted pregnancy.
Yes, a huge part of my activism is this support group, is just showing up and being kind to women who are hurting, who have had abortions, right? That's it. That's the job. It is so impactful and so important because taboo is very, very painful. So our nervous systems evolved to perceive getting kicked out of culture, like being an outcast, as a mortal threat. Because think back to tribal living. You get kicked out of the family unit, you're dead.
Yeah.
Death by exposure,
Yeah.
starvation. We can't live by ourselves. Humans cannot live by ourselves.
Yeah.
We are social animals. And every single part of the nervous system has evolved to see being judged and excluded as being certain death. If you are worried about your family judging you, if you're worried about your friends turning on you, or you're worried about like getting made an example of, that's going to feel terrifying. It's not just going to feel like light social pressure. It's going to feel terrifying. And when you're trying to process your power over life and death that you just use this way in your own body, connection is really important. Being able to talk to people who love you and reflect back to you that you're a good person who makes good decisions, that's everything. So I do it. I show up and I do it every day. I have never heard an abortion story, and I've heard thousands upon thousands, and I've never heard one and be like, well, not that one. That's not the right reason. I only hear women who care a lot about their responsibilities in the world, and care a lot about their families and their future children and this child. I hear women making the best decisions that they can in their situations day in and day out. And sometimes they need to be reminded of that, because we're even harder on ourselves than the rest of the world is on us.
Yeah, because I think it's very beautiful what you're doing, helping those women. The help you provide for those women, is this only for women in the US, or do you help women outside the US on, let's say, an online
I work
basis?
globally. This
You
is
work
global.
globally.
So
Okay.
Ending a Wanted Pregnancy, the place where I mod, I'm part of a team. I'm not the only mod, but the place
Yeah.
where I admin and mod and lead is on Facebook. So you do have to have a Facebook account to go there. I
Okay.
also am active on a subreddit called r-abortion and another one called r-tfmr support. So those are two places where I'm around and I'm helping if you don't want to make a Facebook group, and they're all global. My one-on-one coaching, and when I make courses and stuff, that will also be global. I have clients in several different countries and many different time zones. Women all over the world do experience this, and there are slight cultural differences. You know, I would say that some of my friends who have been through this, who are from cultures like, let's say, China, for instance, when I had my abortion, I was in grad school for engineering. And so many of the women and men that I worked with were Chinese, among other ethnicities and nationalities. And my Chinese friends were so supportive in such a different way than my American friends were supportive, because they were like, well, of course you got an abortion. Like, of course you did, because it's a culturally different thing for them than it is for me. And I appreciated having that in the mix of support that I got. I have found sometimes women from the Netherlands have a very hard time with this, and it depends on what their religious orientation is. But some of the religious women from the Netherlands have some of the hardest time of anyone I've ever seen having an abortion and feeling like they're good people afterwards. So I just want to give a little bow to anyone who's listening who's in that position, and say, if you were raised to think this is bad and wrong and evil, it is harder to integrate. But that doesn't mean they were right.
Yeah.
You were right. You know. And you get to be a good person, whatever decision you made.
How can women reach out to you? How can they contact you if they feel like it?
The best way to find me is at my website, which is nightbloomcoaching.com. It's spelled NIGHTBLOOMCOACHING, all one word, .com. And there are ways to contact me through there. You can email me, or you can set up an appointment to just inquire about my work.
Yeah. Kate, what is the most important message you would like to say to our listeners today? What is the most important thing you want to say?
I think the most important thing is that abortion is a universal need.
Yeah.
Women in all countries, even trans men, right? Like, there are some people who aren't women, but anyone who has a womb who could get pregnant may need an abortion. And though it can be tempting to want to distance yourself from that, because it is a big responsibility over life and also death, just lean in. If you trust yourself and your own goodness, it's easier to trust other people and their goodness too. And it's so important. It's important to our safety and our thriving. And it's very important to the thriving of children in this world as well, that every child be welcomed and loved, and that there be resources to care for the child. This is the work of loving children. This is the work of loving ourselves and loving children.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're most welcome.
Thank you, Kate, for sharing your personal opinion, feelings, and emotions with us today. I salute you for speaking up today. On behalf of all women I asked to join me, but who were afraid to speak up, the women who were afraid of repercussions they would have to face if they would join me in this conversation. The more women who told me this, the more women who refused to participate, the more determined I got to get this job, to get this done. I praise you. I salute you for your honesty, your bravery. Thank you. I do hope that our listeners today will be inspired and encouraged by our talk today. I also hope that not only women will be brave enough to speak up. I also call out the men to speak up against this. I always say, and I say this in each and every episode, we women, we need the man. If we want to accomplish anything, we need the man to speak up. And if there has ever been a time for men to speak up on behalf of women, if there has ever been a time for men to support women, it is right now. This is the time to support women, fight along with women for their rights, for an abortion. I would like to end with another result of the Turnaway study. Women are resilient. We are resilient, and we will overcome everything we face. No matter how hard the journey, we will survive because we are strong, and most important, we are women.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks again, Kate, for having this talk with me today. I do hope that because of our talk, there will be more understanding for women who decide to have an abortion, and that people will understand and realize that it is not a decision taken lightly by women having an abortion. In the next episode, I will be having an old friend at the table, Heather Stark. Last year, we had a talk about the beauty myth and the impossible beauty standards society sets out for women. Beauty standards just few women can live up to. Heather and I will be continuing our conversation about the beauty myth, and we will also discuss her book Her Story, which she recently published. Thank you all for listening. Please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to hear your story. My name is Tina de Keyzer, and this is the Women's Table.